Hello friends and neighbors, welcome to my kitchen table. Welcome to another January whiskey review. As I set up, I think in the last one, I'm looking at value whiskeys. It seems appropriate for January. I'm sure we're all having a bit of budget recovery. This time I'm going to do a Canadian. So we're going to look today at some whiskey called, that doesn't make sense. This is Proof Whiskey. It's their 2-grain whiskey. It's wheat and rye. This is Canadian whiskey. As I said in the opener, and thanks for staying with me, I want to look at value whiskeys throughout this month. These are whiskeys that I have bought only on sale or clearance or at a very low regular price point. Disclosure, haven't bought them all in January. Actually, I've bought them as I've seen them come up in sale, and but now I thought January is an appropriate time to look at them. So this is a Canadian whiskey. As I mentioned in the intro, it's 2 grains. It's wheat and rye. It's put out by a company called Proof. They release spirits for the cocktail crowd, and that'll be important later. This is their whiskey. It's sourced, we don't know from where. What I've read is that it's from Alberta. I suspect it's actually Highwood, but I don't have any confirmation or proof of that at all. I saw this actually in a small rural town. Saw it at a clearance price, about $20. I don't know what it regularly goes for, but you know what? I had it in my hand. I hadn't heard of it before. It's 42% wheat and rye. That's really all it says. The company's out of Toronto, but as I said, it's sourced. So let's talk a bit about the whiskey. As you maybe can see in the camera, I know light isn't the best right now. It's very light, very that kind of, I can't even say straw gold. It's straw maybe, or just a pale, it's like an applesauce, apple juice, yellow, just a pale yellow. So it might be uncolored. Certainly it's young. Let's see what we get out of the whiskey itself. So I have to say, you can see I'm not deep in the bottle, but when you open up this bottle, I suggest you open it up a day or two in advance and leave it open for an hour or so. The first note you get, if you pour this certainly right out of the bottle, it's better today than it was when I cracked the bottle. You're gonna get that acetone, nail polish, that very young raw alcohol. Fortunately, it actually fades away. I will say, I'm not deep into the bottle, but it's been open for about a week. And it's no longer the very strong first thing I get. Instead, what I get, very clear, very strong citrus. This is a mix between, some lemon, but more like grapefruit, or you've just peeled an orange or a grapefruit and you've got that oil in the air. Strong citrus. Maybe a hint of a sugar, but the citrus is almost overpowering. Now maybe a herbal note. Right, so a little bit of a grassy note. What I don't get, and I expected because it's just wheat and rye, is really some spice. I really expected a peppery, spicy, not getting it on the nose. Little floral, a little of that high sweetness going on. Lots and lots of lemon and grapefruit. There still is a fair amount of acetone in the nose. See how it tastes. Cheers. Taste matches the nose, but it is decently coating in the mouth. Feels okay. And there is a little bit of a peppery perk up in the mouth. So you got coating, a little bit of spice. Now I would say some grain sugars, some sweetness that way. Still lots and lots of lemon. But it plays around good in the mouth. The finish is very clean, a little bit dry. And if you're left with thinking, what did I just have? It's going to come right back to that lemon tart, right? There is maybe a bit of grain, little graham cracker in there, but there's very little cask influence that I can pick up. And aside from the pepper in the mouth, very little rye influence. Oh, maybe the herbal notes from the rye too. Anyways, that's the tasting notes of this whiskey. I love that it tells you the grain. I love that it's bottled just a bit higher, 42%. I wanted to find more history. I couldn't. As a sipper, this is very likely to disappoint. This is something that I would not recommend to the whiskey community to pour and relax. I really feel if that was their prime target, they missed their target. So after I'd bought, after I'd opened, after I'd sipped, that's when I did my research, which isn't really the right time to do research on a whiskey. But I looked up, and a couple of pretty big names in Canadian whiskey had actually reviewed this a while ago, like in 2016. So that also says this has been on the shelf probably in that small rural liquor store for a number of years. So the fellow who writes for In Search of Elegance and the Rum Howler Online, both of them reviewed this back in 2016. And both of them had pretty similar notes to what I was getting off this. And they really emphasized, but Proof is going after the upscale cocktail market. And that made me think, why don't I try to make, and they reference a cocktail, it's called the Urban. I'm going to make it right now and tell you what I think of this cocktail. Okay, sorry. I thought I had everything I needed for the cocktail group, but I'd forgotten an opener. I wanted to make the cocktail, it's called the Urban, that the Proof Spirit Company recommends for their whiskey. It's a fairly simple one. The recipe, you know what, I'll either put a link to the Proof group or I'll just throw the recipe in the notes. It's really, really simple. It's just going to put a couple of ice cubes in the shaker here, and starts with 1.5 ounces of their whiskey. And then we're going to add lemon juice, 1 teaspoon. I measured that out ahead of time. And then 4 ounces of pear juice, which I got at an Italian store. It actually turns out that this little bottle, very cute, is exactly 4 ounces. So that makes it super easy to measure. So just lemon, pear, and the whiskey itself. That's the entire ingredient list. And basically just put it in a shaker with some ice. There is some ice in there. And shake it up. Kind of a first for Whiskey Neighbor here. I think I made an Irish coffee once, but I don't think I've ever made a cocktail. Just basically get it nice and cold. And you can tell I don't make enough cocktails. That was exciting. And then we're just gonna strain it out over ice, although I'm not sure I would need to strain it since it is ice. But we'll just get enough in there to taste. Now, hopefully you're smarter at making cocktails than me and you won't make a mess like that. Clearly, when you give something a good shake, sometimes you can build up a little bit of pressure. All right, we'll clean up that mess later. And pear, lemon, whiskey. What is this, the Urban, like? Let's see. Well, you know what? Really, it's very fruity on the nose. It's very, sweet. And one thing I will say, no hint at all of that acetone. See what it tastes like? The pear juice gives it really quite enough sweetness, so I'm glad there was no other additional sweeteners in this. but it's actually a very refreshing cocktail. And I am not an expert in cocktails, clearly. I think you'd have to let your bartender go, or even your host, if they're making a mess like that. But I actually appreciate this cocktail quite a bit. And after reading about how they set this up, and then coming back to the whiskey, because I would give this, as a sipping score, it's very low. It's 2 to 2.5 stars, one of the lowest I'd review if it really was targeting sipping. It's just too, in a sense, off balance. But it's not bad. I think a misconception, and I'm guilty of this a lot, if I try a whiskey that's not great, I often say, well, maybe try it in a cocktail. In the sense you're trying to blend away its problems. And one of the problems here is the nose. And when you do put in a cocktail, at least I can't find that same kind of acetone, that young alcohol. So it does get rid of that problem. But the strength of this whiskey is a little bit of its herbal note and a lot of its citrus. And I will say that citrus, now we've amplified it by adding a bit of lemon juice, but with this pear, and then a strong citrus whiskey actually works very, very well. And I would recommend it, if you are looking for a whiskey that will add quite a bit of lemon, grapefruit type notes, not necessarily spice. I really, the wheat rye label on here is a little bit misleading, but if you're looking for something in your bar and you're in Canada, this is a very affordable whiskey and makes a fine cocktail. Well, thanks for joining me for this quite different episode of Whiskey Neighbor. Hope you guys are having a fantastic January.